You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest options platforms in the world. MIAX is now trading options on the SPIKES Volatility Index, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction for confident trading, all for competitive exchange fees. It's time to make a change and give yourself an edge with SPIKES. Learn more about SPIKES at www.miaxoptions.com/spikes. Options involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody, that music means once again, it is time for Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. My name is Mark Longo from the old optionsinsider.com, as well as from the network upon which you're listening to this fine program. Hope you're enjoying. I hope you're liking the slew of content that hits you on a pretty much daily basis. We keep you engaged, if nothing else, here on the old network. If you only listen to Vol Views, if you're only subscribing to Vol Views, make sure you get on over and subscribe to the full network, because you're missing out on literally a dozen other shows that you could be enjoying. So if you're not inclined or you haven't headed over there yet, for some reason, pull the trigger, subscribe on whatever platform you like, or just get it on our website. It's all there as well. And however you listen, including live every Friday, 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern, make sure you hit us up, questions, comments, insights, pearls of wisdom. We do indeed like to hear from you guys. And joining me on the program today, first off, he is the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian. Mr. Sebastian, welcome back to the show, and happy Sean Astin Appreciation Day to you, sir.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate Sean Astin so much. He's one of the people I appreciate most, I got to say. I mean, the range of characters that he has played is amazing, right? He's played a kid with
Goonies,
asthma.
Rudy, Lord of the Rings, you name it.
My favorite one was when he played the little brother in 50 First Dates or whatever. You remember with Adam Sandler?
I forgot he was in that movie, but you're right. Yes.
I think that is one of his underappreciated characters that he's played. I also loved him in Stranger Things. I cried when he spoiler alert. I cried when he got killed.
No spoilers for Stranger. You're gonna get everybody angry there with the spoilers.
No, I'm a big, I'm a big Sean Astin fan, just like I'm a big Henry Schwartz fan.
Well, I don't know who would be a Henry Schwartz fan, but we'll get to that in a second. But you're right. It is funny to see the entire internet apparently can at least agree on one thing, that we all like, Goonies and Rudy and Lord of the Rings, and a.k.a. Sean Astin. So, yes, I think we can all get behind such sentiment out there in the world. I believe we even retweeted it on our site today. Put a little fun, a little levity into a day that's otherwise was looking kind of grim, maybe looking a little bit better. Maybe Sean Astin Appreciation Day is working into the markets and turning things around. And speaking of turning things around, let's see if our guest can do just that. He is technologically challenged, but I believe we got him now. It's the return of the Flowmaster, listeners. He hasn't been on in ages. Yes, Mr. Henry Schwartz, the founder over there at Trade Alert. Mr. Flowmaster holding down the MIAX hot seat today. Welcome back to the Volatility Views program. How go things in the land of the flow, sir?
Everything is good. I'm happy to be with you guys after I solved my Skype woes. If you only use it once every 4 months, it doesn't work super well.
Yeah, they like to force those surprise updates on you, and then that kind of just gums up all the works, and it's downhill from there. But I'm glad you can make it happen. Hope that hot seat isn't too uncomfortable for you. Hope you don't have to squirm too much as we keep on rolling right on into the Volatility Review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Vol Review. This is the portion of the show where we review the vol that is going on this week and indeed unfolding in the marketplace today from a trade and a trend and unusual activity and all sorts of other fun perspectives. And it seems like coming into the show today, we don't know yet for sure because it hasn't fully taken place, but it seems like the narrative may be unfolding or setting up to be something similar to what we saw earlier in the week where we saw a pronounced sell-off on the open, getting spooked by trade war woes. That's pretty much what we saw earlier this week and what we saw again today. Most of the major indices off close to a 1%, if not beyond that in some of them. And then, of course, as we're coming into the showtime here, it seems like maybe, hasn't fully happened yet, but maybe the sell-off mitigating a bit. S&P off a mere 0.5% now. Dow off 0.25%. NASDAQ off 0.75%, a little more than that, actually. So leading the charts to the downside. Gold and oil both getting a little bit of a lift today, which is kind of interesting. Listening to Twifo yesterday, we've been talking about just how beaten up WTI has been of late. Kind of one of the lesser heralded aspects of this whole trade war debacle is the impact going on out there in crude oil and indeed WTI. And our old friends VIX and spikes, they were feeling a lot more of their oats kind of coming off a little bit now. Before coming into showtime, we were seeing spikes at about a 19.5, which was exactly unched from this time last week, so unched from last show. And VIX cash was at about a 19.25. So that was also exactly unched from last show. But fast forward into the beginning of showtime here, and we're seeing both of those coming off a wee bit now. Spikes at about 18.75. That puts it down about 0.75 of a point from last week. And the VIX cash at about a 17.75 or so. So that puts it down over a point, about 1.5 points from where it was this time last week. So again, vol starting to come in a little bit, markets starting to rally. Will we see a full turnaround like we saw earlier this week? Maybe, or maybe we'll just exacerbate it. Who knows? But right now, at least, the depths of the downside seems to have been mitigated a bit. Our old friend VVIX also coming off a little bit as well. It's at 103.5, I should say, right now. A week ago, it was at about a 106, so we're down about 2.5 points from where we were last week. Still elevated, still in the triple digits for VVIX, but not quite the crazy town levels we saw earlier this week. All right, he hasn't been on in a while, so let's give him pride of place here. Mr. Flowmaster, what is lighting up your tape? What is catching your eye? What is going on in the world of Trade Alert with all this madness going on in the markets these days, sir?
Well, the last week and a half, I mean, this is what we live for, right? Is when things get really interesting and you have these dislocations and a little bit of panic. And, it was fun to watch, to watch this happen. I guess, it was also fun because I wasn't short any gamma when when the futures were down 70, 80, 90 handles on Monday. But it was to watch, obviously, we saw some big volatility buying, in that week leading up until, as things were starting to get kind of hairy. And then Monday was kind of the move that people had been looking for, which was interesting. And I actually talked to a couple different floors, and we haven't seen a 100-point futures move in a long, long time. And, obviously at the level that we're at now, 100 points isn't, the 5, 6, 7% move. So you don't start to completely lose your mind, but it's still, people that are used to looking at the SPOOs and, 20 handles is a big move, 30 handles is a big move. To see it down 70, down 90, it's kind of a shock. So what we were really looking at was trying to kind of understand, how much of the, that jump in vol at the beginning of the week was, true panic, people being forced to cover. And, there's been a lot of talk over the last, couple of years about the harvesters, right? The people trying to monetize the risk premium. And trying to kind of sort out, okay, what's going on here, and what is the net effect on those kinds of traders in a move like that. And then as you get these big recovery bounces, is a very interesting project. So that kept us very busy all week.
Obviously, this has got to be exciting times for you guys because you mentioned these are what you live for. These are the moments where the analyzing of flow must just go to a new level over there. People are beating on the platform, using a lot of your stuff. Were there any interesting nuggets you noticed? Any interesting takeaways as you're starting to parse all the just fire hose of data that is hitting trade alerts over there these days? Anything kind of leaping off the page at you? Like, that's interesting. I didn't really expect to see that.
Well, I mean, to me, the most interesting thing was, and hindsight is 2020, but the biggest trades that we saw over the last, 2 or 3 weeks had been getting long in gold and the gold ETFs and, all the variations of that sector that are tradable, and also getting long some pretty serious upside in volatility. In spikes, we had seen the big 1x2s, at the end of July. And in VIX, we saw, size buying at that, the 24, 25, 26 strike. And, I don't think this move was it was a very big surprise to people. And even in the big index products, we noted a buyer of about 25,000 downside puts, like straight out, normal SPX puts. So there were people that were positioned for this. Now, what's kind of wild, and we did quantify some of the the P&L to the trades that are obviously it's a mix of science and art in trying to figure out exactly what some participant is long or short. But there were plenty of very obvious big blocks to keep an eye on. And we saw P&L up towards $100 million in the volatility complex that was loaded up on. That's big. That is, we see, $5 and $10 million hits, pretty regularly, but $100 million is a big swing for some participant. And we did not see them, turn around and flip out of it kind of when things were at their worst at the end of the day on Monday. So you have to kind of try to dig in and figure out, okay, are they, kind of monetizing that position in other ways? Can be in, can be in trading gamma. It can be traded in trying to, lock things in with futures. So, but the big takeaway was looking at what was going on in volatility products and in also in the metals. It was not the biggest surprise to a couple of the big players, at least.
Yeah, metals were lighting it up. Have to get you on Twifo to parse all that good stuff we've been talking about in the metals over there of late. But speaking of the vol products here, before we rotate on, you sent over a great chart here before the show, kind of summarizing the entire volatility complex in terms of different products over there. It's a great visual. We'll maybe have to share it out with some people so they could see it in the show notes. But use your best ability, sir, to translate your visual into words. Break this down for our listeners, this amazing chart you sent over here before the show.
Well, yeah, it's one of my famous, really colorful, really hard to understand charts. But really what I was, I do, the volatility complex, you have to take as one big unit. And, so, what we did was basically pull together everything, right? Spikes and VIX and VVIX and everything, everything tradable, even, some of the really thin things. And we just plotted the open interest over time over the last couple of years and the average daily volume the same. And, what I really wanted to see, because, we hadn't seen, volume spike in a while. And obviously, you look back to 2018 and we had the VIX apocalypse, whatever they call it. And then with some of those products actually disappearing, you definitely had a drop in activity. But when you kind of look at everything that is still there, you are seeing a pretty decent resurgence in both volumes and volatility and open interest, and you are seeing it split among the leading products again. So you can actually see in that chart. You can definitely put it in the show notes or on your site. You also can see where the VXXB replaces VXX for a while, and then they do a name change and put it back into VXX, which is really messy. But at least you can kind of, when you pull it all together, it makes more sense. So just watching that volume kind of get back up, and what's also funny is, remember, that the OIC, there was a lot of talk about how single stocks had really come back into favor, and after several years of indexes and ETFs edging them out, you get kind of these big moves like what we had in the last week and a half, and it goes right back to ETF and index products because in a panic, that is where people go. So we saw busiest day of the year on Monday. And then I think the second busiest of the day, second and third busiest day of the year were this week as well. So it's been good, and market-wide average daily volume for August, which is only a third of the way through, is well over 22 million contracts, which is nice.
Wow, they're not messing around.
Yeah, they're not playing around.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way that narrative can switch, right? I mean, if you'd have talked to the guys in the SPX pit 6 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, they would have told you it's horrible and clearly trading is dead forever, and they're everybody's leaving and so on and so on, and it just takes one quick turn. And I was talking to a broker friend of mine. He was telling me that the amount of SPX he was trading, he had not traded in forever, and that SPX absolutely blew up Thursday, Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. Just huge volumes. We did see and a ton of volume in VIX as well. It was pretty stunning.
Yeah, I think stunning is a good word to describe everything we've been seeing out here. I want to hit on your point really quickly, Henry, that you just kind of mentioned, because we were hitting on that ourselves just through our other shows earlier this week, and we start parsing all the volume numbers out there. By the way, I want to let our listeners know, since the Flowmaster is on today, every single nugget, every single bit of data, the entire show notes, were all constructed using the Trade Alert platform, listeners. So we can thank the Trade Alert for all of the nuggets of data we have coming our way today. Head on over there, tradealert.com. Kick the tires for yourself. It's pretty cool stuff. You can see all the stuff we're going to talk about today. But interestingly enough, we had noticed that earlier this week, is that once it starts hitting the fan, that's when everyone, once again, they all flock back into the indices, whether it's because they were passive for so long and they need to adjust those hedges there, or that's just where their focus is. And the numbers we were seeing in the top 10 in the equity most actives were pretty paltry. On days when the indexes were doing a couple million here, a couple million there, we're seeing the top 10 most active indices, Amazon doing like 120,000, which is good, but nothing crazy. And so that seemed like an odd disconnect, and I'm glad to see you kind of noticed that as well, that these are weird times. And when weird times are afoot, then the game is afoot in the indexes, not in the single names, which is an interesting pattern and one we've kind of seen pop up a few times now when things start moving. Speaking of moving, we're seeing some movement out here in the VIX futures curve. Coming into showtime, it was pretty flat. In fact, we saw the cash pretty much right around the line of that front future. It was about 18.75, and the front future is about 18.90. Obviously, we've seen a little bit of evolution in that as the show has kicked in here a little bit. Now we're seeing the cash again right around that 18 handle, and the front AUG future at about 1840, 1835 or so. So a little bit of a gulf between the cash and the front future, but not a ton. And the SEP future they're actually right now, they just ticked, they are equidistant. They are both 1837 right now. So that front portion of the VIX curve is pretty flat, literally. And then it kind of hovers around there. And you get out to DEES. Let's see, where's DEES now? DEES is 17.5. So we were remarking on this on the option block earlier this week that DEES still sticks out. It's kind of a weird part of the curve, oddly cheap, a lot of weirdness there. You could roll from AUG to DEES right now and get a pretty hefty credit to do it. So get out there. If you got some VIX on, get some rolling, listeners. I think they termed it yesterday in the option block a funky VIX curve. That's about as good of a term as any to describe it. Is this funky VIX curve, is this kind of standing out to you as well?
Yeah, and there's been some good trades. I can, if you look at the curve, it's not, it's not really acting the way you would expect, and it's really just really flat. It looks, if you see it on a chart, we're slightly backward in the futures, but we're in contango with the cash itself. And, that's always kind of shows you that we're in a transition period. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity in the market right now to do future spreads, and they look really interesting to me. I can see several that are tantalizing to me in terms of future spreads that I would be interested in doing.
Tantalizing future spreads. You heard it here first. Also tantalizing is some of the options volume we're seeing out here these days, listeners. And, let's kick it off in the land of the spikes, as we are wont to do. Another active week out here for spikes land. The vol complex, like Henry just mentioned, kind of lightening up. And spikes was no exception. Let's talk the top 5 out here. Let's see, that 1x2 still kind of dominating it here out here in top 5 for OI here in the hot spikes positions. 10,000 still of those SEP 25s. Then we got 5,386 of the AUG 26s. Those ones have also kind of remained pretty popular since last week. 5,000 of the SEP 17s, 3,700 about of the AUG 18s. Around out the top 5, we got 2,000 of the AUG 30s. Which is kind of interesting. Again, that top 5 brought to you by the Trademaster, and by the Trademaster. That's an interesting name. The Flowmaster, a.k.a. the guy over there holding down the fort at TradeAlert. Now, Henry, I know you've been analyzing and parsing spikes flow a lot. In fact, we've seen some of your data come through the show recently as some of these big 1x2s and other things that have been going on of late. So this is obviously a product that's kind of caught your eye as well. And anything catching your eye? Because there were some trades going up this week. Anything catching your eye out here in Spikes land this week, sir?
I do love to watch the Spikes product because in a way it's obviously it's got it's very similar to VIX, but because it's such a new product and there's kind of clearly only one or two people touching it so far, it's even easier to track what's going on. So we are able to, when that 1x2 was opened, it was crystal clear what the trade was, and then when the next trade, which was an adjustment to it, was done, we can actually, we always try to put the follow the dots, right? Okay, 1,000 of these traded on the bid, and then 2 weeks later at a lower price they traded on the offer, and the open interest went down. That's how we basically track people getting into and out of positions, but it's obviously much easier if there's kind of the trades are more distinct. So, so one thing, what we've seen in the big trades in Spike, it's funny, you kind of have a split market, right? You seem to have one big institutional trader who started out with that long 1x2, which after looking at it and talking to some participants, sounded like a trade that had been done in VIX pretty consistently and just repeated, moving over into the Spike product, right? But what's also interesting is I like to look at the little tiny trades, relatively, because that shows you somebody else, who probably knows what they are doing, is kind of stepping into the product. So like, today, there's just, it's, that there's the average daily volume in there is still low. But like today there's a 17 lot, 3-way. And so trying to figure out, okay, what is this person, what do they think they're doing? What's their goal? It's opening all the way around, and it looks like basically a SEP 19 put against the 2130 call spread. Okay, so we'd call that usually a call spread collar kind of thing, and basically in these VIX products we see people either trying to just pick up some premium or use it as a hedge for kind of a bigger or broader equity position, and looking at a little ratio spread a little collar like this using a call spread, it looks to me like an upside play. But by doing it in a spread, I think in this case the net price was only about a dime, and they end up long the 2130 call spread in kind of anticipation of things staying a little bit rocky into September. So I really do love to watch it because it's things are nice and simple because there's so few trades. It's a little bit more transparent.
I'm glad you brought up the little ones because I thought it was just me that was watching the little stuff out there. Because I kind of find that fascinating as well because obviously the retail is starting to trickle in. Maybe they listen to this show. Maybe they're finding on their brokerage platform of choice. Who knows? But they're starting to trickle in. And you're right. They got to be a little bit on the savvier end of the spectrum anyway to probably find their way to understand the vol complex to begin with, and then find their way to a product like this. And then they're starting to do funky, verticals versus puts. And it's interesting. This is you're right. That 17 lot that also came across my radar today as well, which I guess says something. But we've often joked in Spike's land about Super Tuesday. That for some reason, I don't know, Henry, have you noticed this too? For some reason, the paper kicks off on Tuesday every week out there. I don't know what it is, but there is a lot of flow in Spikes on Tuesdays, and this week was no different. Looks like another vertical here, AUG 1826 vertical. Going up, it looks like about 1,500 times, the two big blocks, 780 and then 720 doing it. Looks like for about 217 and about 217 both times. Looks like, and let's see, what were they up to here? Looks like they were probably buying this vertical. So again, kind of speaking of what we were saying before, a lot of love for upside out there. When we get to the VIX options, you'll see that in a bit as well in terms of what's hot out there. But the Tuesday, a big day, but ironically, not the biggest day this week, so I guess you got to call it Super Monday now, but Tuesday, for whatever reason. Whoever's lighting it up out there in Spikes, I would love to know why you pick Tuesday every week, but that seems to be what's happening. Monday, though, this week, also active, so breaking the mold a little bit this week. It looks like another vertical AUC 2030. Remember we talked about the AUC calls getting in that top 5. That came from this 1x2 here. The AUC 2030 going up 1,000 by 2,000 times. Looks like doing that for about 55 cents. Paper buying that bad boy as well, which is kind of interesting. Usually we see that the other way, but they're lifting offers and actually lifting offers on both, which is a weird one. So maybe they got a great fill on the bottom leg. I would probably intuit, this is opening on both legs too, so they're not closing or rolling, listeners. I would probably think they might want to do that as a sale, but hey, crazier things. This is an interesting execution. I'm going to have to dig into that one a little bit more as well. And then the AUG, we got an AUG vertical against puts. Again, this is the AUG 17 versus the 1824 going up about 1,000 times as well. So pretty active. This one is not opening, so maybe a little bit of adjusting or closing there. Mr. Flowmaster, did you notice this weird 1x2 on Monday as well? Since you are the master of all flow, do you have any more insight into what the heck they were putting up there?
Yeah, I did have, actually I saw it and struggled with it a little bit. It's funny, there's a trick that you want to do with Spikes currently because the markets still haven't quite tightened up, is I actually go and use the VIX prices to double check the trade levels because, in these cases, you might have a 20 cent wide quote on the screen. If you go and compare it with the corresponding option, right, because they really are identical in terms of, for all real uses, you can kind of double check. And in this case, I know they both were offer side. I doubt that it's somebody buying, the stupid. Usually people are doing these. Basically, they're selling one. They're buying one to sell two, and they're doing it for either zero or for a slight credit, and basically. Kind of in general, hoping to keep the money. I think that the futures and in Spikes, what we do is we use a synthetic future. The future at the time was under 19, so these were both out of the money. It's also possible it was the same trader of the 5,000 by 10,000 just trying to kind of tweak their risk profile a little bit as things were getting a little bit more heated up.
There you go. Some pro tips there from the Flowmaster. Mr. Meatball, you got a lot of crazies floating around your pit chat who are on the bleeding edge of the vol space. Any of them starting to dip their toes? Is this 17 lot perhaps? Is this an option pit devotee here?
It could be. They don't tell me everything.
I thought you had your fingers on the pulse of the pit chat, sir.
So I don't know. I mean, they don't tell me everything, but it's definitely something we talk about and we look at. So, because you never know when there's going to be a really, something up in there. And eventually this thing is going to tighten and there'll be some, same way we look at SPY and SPX against each other, we're going to end up looking at these two indexes against each other, I think.
Let's roll on right on into the VIX options. And, it was a crazy week. Today, not so much a crazy day. We kind of just mentioned that sell-off. Seems like it was mitigating a little bit. Let's go check in again and see if halfway through the show, if that trend is still the case. Yeah, that is still the case. S&P only off about 0.4% now. NASDAQ about 0.75%. So the sell-off is mitigating, continues to mitigate here, listeners. So maybe that trend we saw earlier in this week will play out. VIX cash back over the 18 handle a little bit again, though. So maybe not all is right with the world yet. So today, kind of a light day. Just about 250,000 contracts on the tape. That ADV has just skyrocketed over the last week and a half, listeners. Remember, we were talking earlier, just a couple weeks ago, 2 shows ago, how paltry the ADV was out there in VIX land. It was threatening to break it was just around 400,000, which, it's seasonally quiet time, I get it, and that's usually what you'd see, but the markets were actually moving. We weren't seeing VIX kind of keeping up with the game. That has changed over the past week and a half or so. The ADV up to 650,000. That's up another 120,000 just from our show last week. And you know how much it takes paper-wise to get that ADV budging in VIX land. So it's up quite a bit. Not quite 50%, but pretty darn close to it just from where it was this time last week. In terms of the top 10, the hot positions out there in VIX land, this kind of gets to what Henry was talking about earlier about the love for upside, because it's all calls. It's the first time we've seen this in quite some time where there's not a put to be found in the top 10 for the hot positions out here in VIX land this week. Let's just start from the bottom here. The number 10 here on our list, $165 of the AUG 21 calls. Number 9, 170,000 of the AUG 28 calls. Number 8, the aforementioned, we talk about these every week, 37.5 strike. It continues to fascinate people out there for some odd reason. 173,000 of those. Number 7, the AUG 18s, 195,000. Number 6, SEP 24 is our first SEP on the list here, 207,000 of those. Number 5, back to AUG, the AUG 25s, 216,000. Number 4, the SEP 23s, 248, just shy of 250,000. Number 3, the SEP 25s, 251, just north of 250,000. Numero dos here, the AUG 19 calls, the comparatively reasonable AUG 19 calls, 259,000. And rounding out the top 10 here, they're actually pretty light, 365 of the AUG 20s. If you've been listening to the show for a while, that number 1 spot can easily be well north of 400, 500, even 600,000 contracts sometimes. So total OI is pretty strong out there, almost 10 million contracts, I should say. About 7.5 on the calls and about 2.5 million on the puts, but it's obviously scattered across a wide variety of strikes because number 1 out here, only 365,000 of the AUG 20s. Mr. Schwartz, we talked before with you on the show. Actually, ironically, the other favorite strike we like to highlight, the 30s, nowhere to be found in the top 10 this week, which is kind of interesting. But there is this odd fascination, if you will, with their 37.5 strike. Have you noticed this as well? These weird strikes in VIX, 30s and 37.5s. I'm not sure who it is out there who's aggregated and just flown to these strikes, but have you noticed this as well, Mr. Flowmaster, where those strikes seem to pop up an inordinate amount of times here in the hot VIX spectrum?
Well, yeah, we usually see kind of people picking round strikes that they're kind of comfortable with. I bet you people are getting more and more quantitative about, kind of where they're modeling the kind of inflection points, the pain points. And I do think that, based on a lot of research that's out there on, the behavior of these vol harvesters and kind of the dynamics of the whole thing, that there is a decent amount of people trying to gauge where these harvesters all are basically going to have to start covering, right? So, and trying to kind of draw the line from, okay, fine, if they're selling SPX puts or SPY puts because that's their kind of harvesting model, they're still basically equivalently short some VIX call strike. So, I think that some people are trying to draw the lines between where the kind of the pain points are, potentially, and those are the VIX strikes that they want to own, because kind of that's where we're going to get if things hit the fan.
Interesting. Yeah, there certainly does seem to be some interest in those strikes. Maybe that is exactly what you're talking about. When that, what did they call it back in the journal a few years ago? The volatility feedback loop, when it kicks in, whatever you want to call it. Maybe 37.5, maybe 30, maybe those are the levels. Either way, there's interest in both of those. Today, not a lot of interest. The biggest trade is pretty much looks like maybe a bit of a roll to SEP, the AUG 24, SEP 27 vertical / diagonal, going up 8,000 times. And that's the biggest trade on the tape. It's a pretty quiet day out there in VIX land. Thursday, that was a different beast, though. Our friend, the Fly Guy, he was back out here for a little bit of size, doing looks like a Dees fly this time. Dees 18, 16, 13 put fly, doing it for a penny. When it's a penny, it doesn't really matter if it's a debit or a credit, but doing it for a penny. Doing it 20,000 by 40,000 times, so 20,000 of the 18 puts for $282, 40,000 of the D16 puts for $1.60, or $1.59, excuse me. When you're talking a penny, every little cent matters. And then 20,000 of the D13 puts for 37 cents. Also saw what maybe was a funky strangle seller, AUG 14 half 25 strangle. 10,000 times, looks like being sold for 64 cents. So an interesting choice there as well. That was on Thursday. Wednesday, another fairly somewhat quiet day. I mean, the biggest print out there was the SEP 14 puts for 22.5 cents, 20,000 times. Again, exactly mid-market, which is what we expect. Pretty much par for the course out there in VIX land. Also a little bit upside. AUG 23 calls going up for $1.55, 12,000 times. AUG 20 calls, $2.15, 10,000 times. And then Tuesday looks like a 1x4. So our old friend, the 1x2, is back and amped up to 11, going 1x4 instead. It was the Nove 26, 35, 1x4 call spread, 10,000 by 10,000 by 40,000 times, going up for $1.01 and 44 cents. That one, again, kind of mid-market. You would think they're probably selling that bad boy, but I mean, usually when you see these ratios, the whole point is to get you to have that upside kicker so that you have it when the madness hits. But again, both legs are not opening. There's size open interest on both of these, so maybe he had it on and he's taking it off now because we did see a little bit of a spike, pun intended, earlier in this week, and also a bit of a roll of AUG from AUG to Nove, the AUG 30. Nove 29 call spread going up 16,000 times there as well. Monday, not surprisingly, was a pretty big day. We saw 50,000 of the AUG 40. I guess you can call it a roll. 50,000 of those times going up for looks like about 54 cents there. 20,000 of the SEP AUG 19 roll. So a lot of rolling going on Monday as well. Maybe taking advantage of a little bit of a pop to get out to a farther month there. 20,000 times. AUG vertical as well. AUG 2030 vertical going up 11,000 times for $1.55. That was on the offer, or excuse me, on the bid. So it looks like paper maybe dumping one of those. Maybe they had a vertical on, taking it off when they saw a bit of a pop out there. Mr. Flowmaster, you are analyzing flow day in, day out. What's catching your eye? Also, you got some cool visuals you're actually sending over here as well. I'll have to parse that. But while I'm looking at your visuals here, any other flow catching your eye this week out there in the explosion, the maelstrom of flow that was VIX options this week?
No, well, I do want to see if we could get Sebastian to trade a couple 100,000 contracts so we don't lose this streak of volume over 20 million contracts a day for August.
Get going, Mr. Meatball.
We only need it looks like we're going to need about 100,000 contracts, or maybe just get the futures to sell off another 15 points.
I don't know that we're going to get there. I'm looking at the flow for today that I get from the floor, and it's so slow. I've got 5 trades that have been posted. That's it. So this is definitely this is a sell-off that even at down 30, it's been mostly ignored.
Yeah, I agree. I think people are a little bit like, yeah, you know what? If we handled a 100-point sell-off, I don't think 25 or 30 wakes anybody up.
No, it really doesn't. And it doesn't, and we held 2,900, which I think was the key there. And that's kind of what, and then bounced off. And now it's just today's turned into a yeah. And, I would not be shocked to see VIX fall to near unchanged by the end of the day, the way things are moving around. It's just, the biggest trade I've seen today was a 6,000 lot August put spread. That seriously is it. Meanwhile, prior to that, every other day we'd seen some really, really just size up trades, and just none of those are hitting today. I think my favorite trade that I saw on the week, I think you're going to like this one, Mark. Customer bought 32,500 of the 16 puts and sold 50,000 of the OC 15 puts, so a little ratio then, and paid $200,000 for the trade. So a little kind of bear ratio trade, betting that things are gonna ease back, but maybe not royally.
I like that. You don't see the ratios as often. We discussed this many times in the dark side to the put side. It seems like all calls all the time. So getting a little bit of ratio flavor in the puts is always nice. Speaking of nice, Mr. Flowmaster, kindly enough providing more visuals. We'll have to tweet this one out or share it out with the show notes as well. Breaking down all the OI out there in VIX land by strike. And you look at it this way, you can certainly see the 37 halves kind of on their own, like a little island up there in the upside where they're clearly dominating most of the other strikes, actually even more than our friends the 30s now. This is across all the months, listeners, so all except all the way out. And 375,000 are open on the 30 strike, which was the former champ to the upside. Now it's 400,000 of the 37 half. So someone has clearly determined 37 half. Maybe it's like the Flowmaster was saying earlier, that maybe that is the inflection point where things start to break, and they want to be there. Could be part of some ratios on some other strikes as well. It goes 28s are 367,000. Then the next biggest strike, larger strike actually, is the 30 strikes, which has more, 375,000. And then the Titan up there is the 37 half strike with 402,000 contracts. You got to go all the way down to the 26 strike to get more OI, which is 409,000 contracts. So, and if you're wondering what the Titan, the number one across all the strikes in terms of strike love, I guess you can call it VIX strike love, is the 16s. Not surprising there, kind of in the range of where we are these days. 871,000. So of that 10 million I mentioned before open, nearly a million of it on the 16 strike. So a little nugget there from the Flowmasters. We keep on rolling into another product you guys like to sling, VXX. It was at about 26.75 coming in to Showtime. Let's see where we are right now. Of course, that put us up pretty much a half a handle from where we were this time last week, and it's pretty much right around that level again, off a little bit, maybe 26.5 now, so up about a quarter. Either way, not a heck of a lot going on. We saw intra-week, of course, a lot going on. We saw gapping up. I think it broke the 30 handle ever so briefly, which is, of course, a line in the sand that all VXX traders like to watch. They like when they load up for it to break 30 to the downside. When it breaks it again to the upside, they get excited, they get interested. Maybe they get worried if they didn't hedge all those puts they have on. Either way, the 30th strike, a pretty important one. I dallied with it ever so briefly this week before coming back down to 26.5. So net, we're kind of unched on the week to week, show to show, but in between, there was a lot of fire, a lot of furor up there. Today, actually, a pretty decent day out here in VXX, 177,000 contracts on the tape. The ADV is about 250,000 exactly. So a decent day in VXX. The top positions out here. Remember, we were talking, it was mostly calls out there. Now the puts have dominated it. Let's run down really quickly. Number 10, only call on the list, the AUG 28, 26,000. Number 9, the AUG 25 puts, 27,000. Number 8, the AUG 23 puts, 28,000. Number 7, back to Jan. The Jan 14 puts, 29,000. Number 6, the SEP 18 puts, 29,000 of those as well. Number 5, the SEP 19 puts, 30,000. Number 4, AUG 20s, the puts, 34,000, almost 35,000. Number 3, the SEP 20 puts, 44,000 of those. The numero dos here, the AUG 19 half puts, 44, almost 45,000. And the top position right now in VXX, the SEP 17 puts, 53,000 of those bad boys. Total about 1.8 million contracts open. Ever so briefly to the puts there, about almost a million to the puts versus about 840,000 to the calls. A big trade today looks like about a vertical, the AUG 2835 vertical going up 3,500 times. Yesterday was a more active day, except 34 calls going up 15,000 times as well. Looks like on the bid, so hitting the bid for opening. A couple of buy rights actually out there, but the big one was SEP 34 calls, dumping them for $1.01. So maybe taking advantage of a little bit of an offer out there, or a bid out there, I should say, to crush some vol to the upside. Let's see. Earlier this week, we also saw a 5,000 lot of the SEP 24-25 spread going up. That was the big trade of the day for a whopping penny. So somebody likes their broker out there. Mr. Flowmaster, anything catching your eye in VXX land before we keep on rolling, sir?
Well, it's interesting. I was just looking at those SEP 17s. Those all came from a butterfly in the middle of July. Somebody bought the SEP 16, 17, 18 like for 8 and 9 cents. Like maybe a total of like 20,000 by 40,000 by 20,000. So, which I guess is going to lose money. But it's only a butterfly, so it's manageable. So nothing else that jumped out at me at VXX. I was scrambling to keep an eye on everything else.
Yeah, VXX, you're right. That guy, he was maybe a little aggressive on his downside. Speaking of aggressive downside, Mr. Meatball, your mentees over there in the pit world, they love themselves some VXX. What was lighting up their tape this week as we rallied back up to pretty much 30 and pretty much right back down to unched here on the week?
Yeah, I mean, that was the funness, right? When it's if you set yourself up properly and, just from a risk management, I think we had this discussion last week, right? When last Thursday happened, you were aggressive and cut your losses to very minimal, you were in a position to make a lot of money on VXX falling back over the last couple of days. And a lot of our guys were set up that way. I had kind of a strangly trade on in VIX versus VXX and used the opportunity of things kind of normalizing to convert the trade into I now own the VXX August 23-25 puts for a credit because of my willingness to unwind my bad trade and put on, which opened up my ability to put on any trade I wanted. And so I did a VIX call spread versus VXX out of the money puts, and it was a really nice trade. I made just a boatload on the call spreads on Monday and a little follow through on the bottom. When did we have that other night? That wasn't yesterday.
Wednesday was a big sell off, then it bounced back.
Wednesday was another one where we had the big sell off and bounce. Yeah, I was able to get out of those on Wednesday, and so I'm the willingness to cut your losses quickly and put yourself in a position to trade is such an important piece of risk management and trading. And that was what we work with our option pick clients, and a bunch of them are very happy because of the way they were taught and we preached to them.
There you go. Talking upside in VXX. I don't talk about that often, but this was certainly the week to have some of that. How many times have we said that, listeners? Have some of that in your back pocket. There are a legion of ways to do it. And this was certainly a week to do such things. All right, let's. We don't even have time to hit on all the earnings of all going on. If you want to check all that out, all the earnings move results reports, theoptionsinsider.com. Click on that options news and articles tab. You can see all that good stuff, courtesy of our friends over there at ORATS. They're crunching the numbers so you don't have to, listeners. So head on over there, check them out for yourselves. We're going to keep on rolling. Let's see if we can really quickly squeeze some of you guys on here with a little bit of the old volatility voicemail.
It's time to share your thoughts and opinions with your fellow volatility traders. It's time to check the volatility voicemail. Make your voice heard by dialing 779-669-4VOL. Posting a comment on the optionsinsider.com, sending an email to questions@theoptionsinsider.com, or posting your questions to twitter.com/options. or Facebook.com/The Options Insider.
All right, welcome to the Vol voicemail. It's the portion of the show where you guys get to write in. By the way, a bunch of you keep writing in about the ever-evolving notion of the premium between spikes and VIX cash. Some days spikes is higher, some days VIX is higher. We touched on it before with notions. Remember, they're different products. SPY is a different beast than SPX. There is a dividend. There's other things to be considered in there, so that certainly feeds into it. If you guys want the nuts and bolts of the calculation, clearly you do. We're going to take a bunch of the questions you guys have sent in. We're going to hold on to those until the next time Simon's on. He is the Spike's father, after all. He actually created it, so he can talk about some of the dragging and some of the other things they're doing that could contribute to the evolution of that premium. So we have gotten your questions. Don't worry. Just we're going to get to them when we have focus on that on an upcoming show. Let's see. We can squeeze in one here. Let's go to Foley. Getting a lot of love here. Getting a lot of love for our love of VVIX, because we have said before, it's a great indicator, and a lot of people are agreeing. Foley chiming in, so you guys are like swammys with that VVIX thing. You call it every time. Well, thank you, Mr. Foley. Or perhaps Mrs. We don't know. We don't judge. Because the second it gets close to 70, it explodes. I think that's the best indicator I've seen in some time. What are the best ways to take advantage of it? Just load up on VIX calls. He, of course, referring to our old friend VVIX, a.k.a. the volatility of volatility listeners, one we've mentioned many times. We did mention it right before the explosion occurred that, hey, we were getting to, I believe, VVIX got into the low 80s, maybe 83 or so. It was starting to threaten the 70 handle. That's a level where we tell you guys, hey, pay attention. We, of course, never prognosticated the extreme moves that we saw. No one saw these massive sell-offs because who can predict such things with the trade war? But we did say, pay attention, because these are the times when the volatility of volatility, aka VVIX, tends to increase and do so dramatically, in which case it is worth, at the very least, paying attention to it as an indicator, let alone trading it. Mr. Meatball, I know this is one you guys watch a lot and talk about a lot in your mentoring sessions and in your pitch chat. Mr. Foley, obviously there's a lot of ways effectively get long the VVIX, right? You're just getting long the volatility of VIX. If you have a go-to methodology in the Carmen line, what's your favorite way of going about it?
It's a whole host. It really depends on really where is VIX at the time and what does, the structure of the options look like at that particular time. Here's what I would say is, at a minimum, that's a time to, generally when you see VVIX doing that, another thing that you'll see is that the quote-unquote future spread tends to get stretched, right? The spread between the front month and the back month. And so it kind of turns into a rubber band. And that can usually be a good idea that, hey, maybe it's time to take short vol off. I'm not as much a favor of playing vol to pop as I am, using it as an indicator to take money off the table. So the beautiful thing is really most investors or traders don't need to be positioned for the vol pop when it happens. What they want to do is be in a position to be able to trade the vol pop after it happens. That's really where you're going to make all your money. I think, stop me if I'm telling tales outside of school. So, obviously, do we play for long vol? Yes. Am I going to tell you exactly how to do it? Yes, if you want to subscribe to our volatility newsletter, which is curated by one Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi, I'll be happy to go through a lot of that. But truthfully, again, I use that low VVIX as an opportunity to take a lot of my short vol off.
Yeah, it works on many levels. As an indicator to get rid of your short vol, that's certainly one possible use case. That's why this question it seems deceptively simple, listeners. There are a legion of ways you can go about using VVIX. That's taking off your upside is just one of them. So, yeah, that's a great question. We could probably spend an hour on just that. But we don't have the time, Mr. or Mrs. Foley. We got to keep on rolling. Keep those questions coming. We'll get to more. Don't worry. There's a lot going on in the market right now, listeners. So we don't have time to devote to all of your questions, even though they are awesome. Front spreads, bullish risk. Oh, so many questions. Gamma traps. We'll get to all of them. Don't worry. Keep them coming. We got to keep on rolling, though, into our final segment. It is time for the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, listeners, we're at a weird impasse here when it comes to the crystal ball. I will say right now, I was on the shorter end of the spectrum in terms of vol reverting, perhaps a little bit more aggressively than it did. I was at 15.25. We're not there right now, but we're at a weird point because we're prognosticating two products now. Remember, and we're making effectively one prediction because it's kind of hard to 1 week spikes is above VIX, the other week VIX is above spikes. So to affect, I guess we could make it really hard and add which one's going to have the premium, but that gets into a lot. Listen, it's already hard enough if you played along with us. It's already hard enough to try to wrestle with the slippery pig that is volatility on any given week, let alone adding all these other layers of abstraction to it. It becomes extremely difficult. So we're going to keep it as one prognostication for now. But we're doing it obviously on two indices, and there's a bit of a discrepancy between the two. In fact, right now, so we had, I think it was the Rock Lobster last week. He was at a 1785. And our old friend Mr. Rhodes, the a.k.a. Russell's Weekly Rundown infamy, he did what he always does. He buys VIX, he buys spikes, and he was at an 1875. So we find ourselves in a weird moment where spikes is at pretty much exactly 1875, 1882 to be precise now. It's ticked up a little bit, but it's pretty much right at 1875. And then we have the VIX cash itself, which is pretty much right around 18. So the Rock Lobster was pretty close, about 0.15 away on his prognostication, but a handle away on spikes. And Russell was pretty darn close, about 0.05 away on his spikes prediction, and then about 3/4 of a point away on VIX cash. So this becomes a weird coin flip here of who actually is the winner. So I'm going to flip that coin, and I'm going to say it was Mr. Weekly Rundown. I'll have to give him some love there. I'll put it on Twitter that he's the winner, even though it's a tight one this week. So that means if he's the winner, Mr. Meatball, you came in second. So I'll give you the pride of place. Do you want to go first? Or maybe since our buddy the Flowmaster hasn't been on in a while, do you want him to go first? I'll let you choose.
So, one, that was my guess yesterday. And as we're talking right now, the VIX is 1793. So I almost hit the nail on the head with VIX.
That was you last week?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
was you?
Remember I gave my whole risk management diatribe?
That's true. You're right. I take that back. So it was you. Okay, so you are pretty close. I'll give you that. You're both about 0.05 away. Either way, they're both pretty good. They both worked out pretty well. All right, so fine. You can go first. I'll let you go first.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to let Henry go first because even if he wins, then it still doesn't really matter.
A little gameplay going on. I see what's going on.
So even if he does win, then he's not going to probably be on the show next week. So I'm guaranteeing myself a shot at owning
a shot at volatility immortality. All right, Mr. Schwartz, a.k.a. the Flowmaster, the gauntlet has been thrown. I tried to buy you as much time as I could for you to formulate your prognostication. We're doing one number. It can apply to both VIX and spikes, so it makes it a little bit easier for you, or challenging, as you've seen this week. What are you feeling for this time next week, Mr. Flowmaster?
Well, maybe you should do like an average of the two. It's funny, as you were talking, I was like pulling up the difference over time, and I know that, what is it, in general, spike trades should fundamentally be a little bit richer.
Spikes usually has like a 1/4 point, maybe a 1/2 point premium usually. It's a little more right now, obviously.
I think that there's a couple things. The dividend screws with it a little bit. It's an afternoon settle that screws with the price a little bit. And then and Henry, I know, without going off on too big a tangent, SPY skew tends to be slightly steeper than SPX skew. And I've never really figured out why, but that does affect spikes relative to VIX.
That makes some sense, especially if that's kind of, well, I guess it kind of depends if you're seeing more put sellers than buyers, but I guess that makes sense. I would pick about 16.2 for both of them. I do think we will calm down, although it'd be more exciting if things stay crazy. But it kind of feels like this has been yet another one of these opportunities.
It's kind of, it feels a little Huey Lewis in the news, right?
Yeah.
This is it. Do up. Anyway.
Well, I think it's like every day goes by and you get a big move and we're all still here. People just get a little bit more comfortable with it. So I think we will chill out. 16.25 is my guess.
Oh, 16.25, not 16.2. Okay, I will amend your prognosis, because as you've seen this week, that 0.05 can come in in very, very strange ways. All right, Mr. Meatball, you get to go next. What are you feeling, sir?
Oh, you know what? I'm going to let you go, Mark. You can go.
I didn't say you could dictate everybody who gets to go. But
I'm dictating.
Since you won,
I will be.
Since you won, this is one of the rare weeks where I did not win. I shall take my lumps like a man. Mr. Flowmaster was at 16 at a quarter. We're at right around an 18, depending on where you're looking, listeners, on the cash in VIX, and then the spike's about 18 and 75. So we're at a decent range. And I was feeling it coming off a little bit last week. It was one of those weeks where we kind of flirted with all of them intra-week. You know, we got close to mine on one point, and then we were up well north of everybody. It seemed like we were all too low for a while there. Then it all kind of came back in again. So the VIX gods, the volatility gods, they are capricious. So Henry was kind of right where I was kind of feeling. I was feeling going up about a point from where I was last week, so about 16 and a quarter. Obviously, I can't go there. So let's change up the script a little bit. I'm going to say north of that then, because I like to be generous and give my guests. I'm not going to be a rock lobster and carp you by a nickel or anything. So I'm going to come in and say I like 16.75. Stuff's coming off, but not a ton. We still don't know what the heck's going on. VIX curve still funky and not a lot resolved, but some coming off. Again, you get kind of inured to it over time. You keep having these systemic shocks, and you're not going to see VIX and spikes pop as much as we did this week. So that's where I am. So, Mr. Meatball, you actually got a surprisingly tight market here. You got 16 and a quarter on the downside, 16.75. You coming in between? You coming outside? What you up to?
By the way, shout out for calling Andrew and his carping. What a market carper.
That guy, last time Simon was on, like the first time he'd been on in like 3 months, the guy gets up at 4 a.m. to do the show, and how does he get rewarded? Andrew carped him by like a penny or something terrible.
What a jerk. I love him.
But it was good stuff, yes.
All right, so we got 16 and a quarter, 16.75. I want to point out, not only did I say, hey, did I hit the nail within half a point? Actually, right now it's 17.84, the VIX. But I said, we're probably going to make a run at 25 first before we back off. And so what I'm going to say right now is that we will see next week the VIX back over 20 on maybe a day. But we're going to see a final Friday of 15.13.
Okay. Oddly precise for the meatball.
Yes.
Usually you're not into that degree of... I think a little victory under your belt has gone a long way
I'm getting a little big for my britches,
to swell your head there a little bit. I'll have to go back to reclaim my title again to calm you down, listeners. But we shall see. The Vol gods shall reward who they shall reward. Meanwhile, though, unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, depending on your view of the show, that music means we are done. Let's go back around the horn. Let me thank each of my cohorts. Let's start with the Flowmaster. He hasn't been on in ages. Mr. Flowmaster, you're there, always cranking away, crunching the flow, so we don't have to. And Mr. Flowmaster, if our listeners out there, they want to check out the size institutional stuff on the Trade Alert, maybe they're more on the retail side, where can they go kick the tires on your various offerings, sir?
We make it very easy. Send an email to support@trade-alert.com, and we can hook anybody up. Or just go to tradealert.com, set up an account. We are always cranking out new and exciting data visualizations using options.
People do like them. And what about on the retail side? Can they go to Option Alert? Or, I'm sorry, what's trading?
No, it is all tradealert.com now.
Oh, it is? Oh, I did not know that. Oh, look at you. See, you haven't been on in forever. I'm not up on the latest whim. So no more What's Trading, listeners. It's all Trade Alert. So there you go. Make your life easier. Go to one place, tradealert.com. Mr. Flowmaster, thank you for coming on the show today, and of course for providing all this awesome data that we got to talk about today. That was good stuff. And Mr. Meatball, we shall see who the Vol gods reward for this time next week. But let's say our listeners are like Mr. Foley. They want to know about how to trade VVIX or some of these other cool things. Where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, last night I did a webinar on what I'm looking at in VIX right now. Go to optionpit.com/Kramer, and I've got a nice little offer there for our VIX primer and subscription to the Vol newsletter. And at the bottom of the page, you can rewatch the entirety of my webinar that I did last night.
There you go. Check out the webinar, optionpit.com, to learn more. And on behalf of the Meatball and Mr. Flowmaster, I want to thank all of you for joining us, and we'll see you next week for more Volatility Views.
Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX. one of the fastest options platforms in the world. MIAX is now trading options on the SPIKES Volatility Index, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction for confident trading, all for competitive exchange fees. It's time to make a change and give yourself an edge with SPIKES. Learn more about SPIKES at www.miaxoptions.com/spikes. Options involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for information purposes only and are not intended to provide and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.